Join us now on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/art-of-photography. Hey everybody, my name is Ted Forbes and welcome back to another episode of The Art of Photography. This episode today I want to discuss color profiles. Now, a couple episodes ago we did kind of a series on printing and we talked about inkjet printers and papers and things like that, and I've gotten just this barrage of emails and Twitter comments and things like that where people were asking me could I go over color profiles, and I think it's kind of a legitimate concern for people who are really into imaging and really into photography. It shouldn't be difficult. I want to keep things simple. You can very much go way into the math side of things, and I don't want to do that today. I want to keep this simple and keep it clear, and it's something you need to pay attention to. If you are more on the amateur end of things on photography, more of a beginner, and you're not using a lot of complicated software, complicated printers, things like that, you're probably not concerned with this. You probably haven't noticed the problem. But if you're more into things and you dig a little deeper, you're going to notice that sometimes there's a mismatch in things. Now, what am I talking about with color profiles so this doesn't get too boring here? Essentially, if you think of like all the points that in the chain that an image goes through from input to output. So input would be just taking an image with your camera, okay? So the camera has recorded the image, that's an input. The output would be one of two things. Either you're printing on some kind of printer, there's a print you're gonna sell, give away, something like that, or you're on the internet and you're exporting as a JPEG to put on a photo sharing website, your own website, something like that. So those are outputs, okay? So the outputs are either for web as a JPEG, some kind of compressed image, or to a printer. Where you're actually going to make an image either yourself or take it to somewhere, some kind of image bureau that will print it for you. And so all the points in between, you risk the problem, or you risk the potential of a color shift, okay? And I'll talk about this a little bit. If you're kind of on the beginning end, like I said, you're using something like iPhoto or Picasso, you probably don't have to worry too much about this because everything's kind of set to a standard, and I'll talk about what that is. But again, some of the issues arise when you're using, like some photographers like to edit their photos in Photoshop. You might be using photo management software like Aperture or Lightroom, something like that. And in each one of these points in that chain, you run the risk of all of a sudden having some kind of shift in color. And so what are established in this day and age are something called color profiles, and we'll talk about that a little bit. There is, you probably heard the term ICC color profiles. What is the ICC? The ICC stands for the International Color Consortium, and it's a group of people that study digital imaging, and they're trying to develop a set of standards so you don't have color shifts. Now, a color shift can occur. Basically, your camera knows what green is, and let's say I'm wearing a green shirt, which I am, and what shade of green specifically is this? Actually, the way the light comes in, it's probably a bunch of different kind of shades of green, but are they more on the day glow green side or on the army green side, or they camouflage, or are they like grass? What kind of green is that green? And that's what's determined by these color profiles. So the color profile specifically is just a set of instructions or information. It's usually embedded inside the image that will tell whatever device it's on what that is. So for instance, your camera generally has a profile associated with it. Photoshop editing software has a color profile associated with it, and the printers have their own definition of what that is. And the printer is a really complicated one because it's having to translate those colors from light colors, which is an RGB, red, green, blue spectrum, to usually something that's print-oriented, CMYK. And so that's usually a big transition that has to happen. We'll talk about that at the end. Like I said, if you're a casual photographer, you don't do a lot of photo editing, you use, and I shouldn't say casual photographer because I know pro photographers who keep things very simple, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're using things like iPhoto, Picasso, basic, system-oriented image editors like that, you're probably not going to have to worry too much about this. Now, cameras usually by default, and if you're really concerned about this, you can go in. Unfortunately, there's no way I can cover all of the equipment that anybody would be using, so I'm going to do the best to tell you where to go look. So you're going to have to probably get out your camera manuals or software manuals, things like that to go along if necessary. But typically, cameras are set up by default to capture in a color space which is known as sRGB. And without going too much into the technical details, this sRGB standard was developed a long time ago as kind of a standard platform across digital gadgets, computers, things like that, that will keep that color spectrum defined consistently across the application. Now, there are some people who argue in this day and age that sRGB is dated, it's older, and while technically on paper, yes, Adobe 1998 1998, things like that have a wider color spectrum that they can capture, but to the human eye, you're not going to notice that. Honestly, I can't tell any difference in photos I've taken using sRGB or Adobe 1998, which are the two big ones. They're way more than that. If you feel like you need to change it, you can do so in your camera, and just know that going through what I'm about to show you. We're going to go over to the computer in a second, but I would leave that set on RGB. That's just a recommendation. If you're, like I said, a casual user of editing software, you don't use anything other than iPhoto or something like that, sRGB is what you want to stick with. That's what they're going to be set up to do, what they're going to output as. And when you go to the web, you also have this browser issue where the browser needs to know that color profile. So you're just really safest with sticking with sRGB. So really, if you want to quit watching this podcast right now, just know that sRGB is what you want to go for. Now, if you're still having mismatch issues, we're going to go over to the computer here, and I'm going to show you, once you get into the software, some things you need to think about. So come on over and let's check that out. Okay, so on the computer here, we are looking at, this is an application that works on the Mac called Aperture. And Aperture is a photo management software. It allows for some simple edits, color corrections, things like that. And typically, after I've shot images on a digital camera or scanned film, I will bring them into Aperture. Now, one thing I failed to mention a second ago is if you are shooting film, you still are dealing with color profiles, because if you're bringing them into the computer, when you scan them, whatever your scanning software is, you need to go into the advanced preferences or advanced options on there and make sure that you go in and double check and see what it's bringing them in for the color profile. And typically there are two choices, sRGB and Adobe 1998. I typically will work with sRGB just for images. That's kind of important to do. So once they come in, okay, I have all of my images that I brought in from, well, these aren't all of them, but this is a set of images that I took in Paris last month. When it brings them in, it will preserve the color profile that they are already on. So these were shot with a digital camera. sRGB was the color space on here, and that's what it brings them in as. Now, you can do editing with these, whatever you want to do. If they were shot in a different color format, Aperture typically will preserve that. So what we need to worry about now is the output. So if I have altered an image, or I've done color corrections or something like that. For instance, let's select this image. This was a shot from the Eiffel Tower, which was pretty cool. Anyway, let's go ahead and right-click on this. And I'm going to say export, and let's export a version. Now, Aperture is not the only brand of photo management software. You have things like iMovie also. iMovie doesn't have any of these options in it. It's just going to stick with sRGB and keep life simple for you. But like I said, when you're using more advanced options, you're going to have more advanced options with color as well. So Lightroom is an application that a lot of people use too. It's available on both Mac and PC. And it has a similar dialogue in here when you try to export an image. It's a little easier to use, actually. But if you're in Aperture, for instance, what I want to do is I'm going to use this export preset here for this JPEG original size. And what I want to do is I'm going to go down and I'm going to say edit this. And under the edit window, there is, for the color profile, I can use the source profile, but typically what I like to do is go down here and force it into sRGB. Okay. Now, one thing that's important to know about this, and you can turn the black point compensation on also, run tests within your system. Whatever you're using, run tests and see if you're experiencing color shifts. And these are the changes you want to make. If you're using sRGB and they're shifting, that means they're probably coming in as a different one, and you might want to preserve that profile. Typically, this is what works best for me. I shoot in sRGB, I'm editing that way, and then I'm exporting to the web this way also. Okay, and I will show you some examples of where this color shift occurs. Anyway, I would go ahead and say OK, and then go ahead and export it from there. Lightroom works very similarly. The only difference is Lightroom, you don't have to go in and edit a preset. It's kind of in the menu right there when you go to export. So let me go ahead and cancel this. The other thing you might want to be doing in Aperture is printing. So if I go into the file, I'm going to say print image. It's real important right here to know how color management works with your printer. Okay, so if you're working with a commercial printer and you're going to take the images to have somebody else and you're going to pay them to print them, you're typically going to burn this out as either a TIFF file or a JPEG or something like that. Make sure they know what the color profile is. Usually they're they're in the metadata, but it's a good idea just to tell them anyway. But if you're using your own printer, I use a Canon printer here, and I have two choices. I can select this BJ Color Printer Profile 2000, which is what I looked up and works best with my printer. or I can say printer manage, which basically says I'm going to tell the printer to manage it. So try them both. If printer manage doesn't work, this basically tells the printer to figure it out. If this creates a color shift that's not to your liking, then get online or look through your manual and find out what that color profile needs to be. There's usually a lot of information to be found. So that's what I'm going to do there. So that's how you control that. Okay, so that we've looked at kind of, I won't go through Lightroom also, but because it works in a very similar fashion. So you're going to bring these in as sRGB as they were shot from the camera and export them the same way. If you have a color shift, then you need to go back and figure out, what that profile needs to be changed to on the export. Okay, so that's how Aperture works. Let me show you another thing you might be using, which is Adobe Photoshop. And Photoshop is the great mystery here. And we're going to try and keep things easy. So if I go into the Edit menu, and it's going to be the same on Windows, I'm going to go down towards the bottom, not all the way, but you're going to find this Color Settings tab, and this is where you can manage all these color settings. Now I have a custom one set up, and I'm going to show you how to build one as well. So if I go ahead and click on this Settings dialog here, I have the Art of Photography selected. If you don't have a custom one, you can go through these workflows that come preset into Adobe Photoshop. And the one you're going to select is North America General Purpose 2. Especially if you're in North America. If you're not, that's fine too. You can still select it. And it goes ahead and gives you kind of a predetermined configuration here, which is pretty good. I like to change a few things in here. For the working spaces, this sRGB, this is going to be your working space, and that's fine. You can leave it set at that. I use Photoshop to create graphics, some other things too, and so I want a slightly bigger color space for that. So I usually go ahead and select Adobe RGB 1998, and you're welcome to do that as well. Now, we have just created a shift, so here's how you combat that. We're going to go ahead and leave CMYK alone, gray, and spot. Under the next tab here, under Color Management Policies, make sure you have Preserve Embedded Profiles selected for each one of these. That means if I bring in an sRGB image, it's just going to keep it sRGB. It's not going to convert it over to 1998 Adobe RGB, okay? And that's very important. The other thing I do is make sure each of these tick boxes is deselected for profile mismatches, etc. I don't want Photoshop to ask me every time, what do you want to do? I just want to bring in whatever they are, and if I'm creating a new document, it's going to be Adobe RGB 1998, and that's fine. Okay, and again, we're going to keep things pretty much simple. Conversion options, Adobe ACE is a good engine, that's fine. With intent, usually what I do is I find that if it does have to convert, I would rather be perceptual than relative colorimetric. Usually that creates less of a shift. It's going to, what the perceived colors are going to be for the algorithm for the software. The other thing, and I have just been experimenting with this because somebody recommended it to me, but you can turn this Use Dither 8-channel images off, and supposedly that just helps with gradients and things. I haven't noticed a big thing myself because I've just started using that. The next thing you can do is you can save these profiles. So if I hit the Save button here, it'll say where do you want to save it, and I'll go ahead and do that. Then what I would do is go into Bridge, and let's cancel out of that. Once you've got it saved, you can open Adobe Bridge. Whoops. We'll go ahead and open Bridge, and I'll show you how you can sync up. If you're using Illustrator or anything else in the Creative Suite, you can do that here. If you go into the Edit menu in Bridge, say Creative Suite Color Settings, and you can go in here, and it would be in your saved ones, and this is the Art of Photography one that I've just set up. I would go ahead and say Apply that, and then the entire Creative Suite is linked up. So that's very important. Let's go ahead. Let me open one of these images here. This is not a great image, but I just need something to show you here. Okay. If you are exporting out of Adobe Photoshop, okay, usually what I do is I go under this File menu at the top, and I will go, you can save as and save it as a JPEG, that works fine, but it gives you a few more options. If I go down and say Save for Web and Devices, this is the one I use all the time. When I select that, it's going to open up this little menu here, and I can say 4 up, 2 up, optimized, and it's going to give me previews of the original and then what the exported image are going to look like, and that's what I'm looking at here, and I can click and drag them around various parts of the image. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go under Preset. Let's select JPEG High, okay, and you will notice your options for the quality of the JPEG image and stuff. You can embed the color profile. I usually leave that deselected, and there's a reason why. Web browsers don't like this, okay? And another important thing is sometimes if you upload images to something like Flickr or Picasa, sometimes it strips out the color profile, and that creates a major color shift. And these are usually the points where the big problems start. So I don't embed the color profile. And then another thing I might want to do is convert this to sRGB. That's what we were doing in in Aperture earlier, and double check to make sure you can check here. And the other thing is to run a test and actually upload something to the web and make sure. But I think usually this is typically where the evil begins in Photoshop and where this becomes difficult. Photographers who typically shoot in sRGB bring it in that way. You're not going to notice a color shift. It's when you shoot in some other color space or create a graphic in Adobe sRGB or something, you may or may not want to convert that to sRGB. So again, run tests, double check these things, make sure they work within your system. So that's a big point right there. I would save this out. It would save the JPEG and put it up online. Let's go ahead and say done. And printing, same thing. As I mentioned in Aperture earlier, you want to check you can either let the printer handle the color profile, or you can assign it one. If you need to assign it one, do your research, look at the manual, look it up online and see what you need to have that set at, because they're all different. It just depends on what kind of printer you have. Okay, I'm going to close these down for a second because I want to show you one last thing. And the web is the tricky one. Let's open this window a minute ago. Okay, I uploaded some images, and I don't know if you're going to be able to tell so much from the video. But this is Minus, which is a website that I showed you for simple web sharing in one of the last episodes that we talked about. And basically what it is some A/B comparisons. And this is that same image from Paris earlier. This is the Adobe RGB version, and here's the sRGB version. And what happened is when I uploaded these to Minus, when I opened them in preview to check them on my computer, and they look the same. But when I upload it to Minus, it's an example of web software that strips out the color profile. So you can see here that the sRGB one looks more like what I intended. This one, and again, I can't tell if the video is going to, bring these over as well, but it's a little bit faded. It's desaturated. It's just not, the black point's off. It doesn't look right. The shot of these shoes, make sure you look at the reds here and the blues on the shoes, and they are much more vibrant here, which is what they were intended to be when I added this in Aperture. Okay, so again, that's the Adobe profile, which it was stripped out in the web browser. So Adobe 1998 doesn't do well when you go to the web because sometimes it gets stripped out of there. And then finally, this shot in particular, this is a subtle difference, but this was taken as the sun was setting, and we got a really nice color cast on the pavement back here, and it doesn't preserve it so well once that color profile is stripped out. So anyway, this is more or less, I know this is a lot of information we covered today. You can rewind and watch this video as much as you need to, take notes, and most importantly, run tests. Don't just take my word for it. Go test it in your system. You may be using different software. You may be on Windows instead of on a Mac. So anyway, those things are very important. Go test everything, and I hope that we've explained basically what your options are in this video. Okay, so that's about it. Again, I want to stress, it's very important to just pay attention to what's going on, keep things simple. Don't try to translate into multiple color spaces when you don't have to. And like I said, if you're on the lower end, if you don't do a lot of complicated editing and things, I think it's best just to worry about what your camera's taking the image at, and then what your settings are for printing output. Web output will probably be taken care of for you. If you're working with a commercial printer and they're going to be printing your images, it's always best to ask them first, either in person or call them on the phone. Say, I'm going to have some colors printed. Is there any specific color space that I need to know about for the printer? Usually what they will do is say, well, we will take care of that on our end. If you're really worried about it and you're still getting color shifts, one of the things I've found, I use a company here in Dallas called BWC, and I like using them because I can go over there and I can talk to them, and they're very personable even if it's over the phone. They also do national ordering, so you don't have to be in Dallas to use them. But anyway, one thing that I do with them typically is I will do a test print on my inkjet printer just so they have an idea of what the colors are supposed to look like and what the image is going to output like. So I can worry about that on my end, hand that to them, and then if they mess it up, they'll go through the iterations there to get it right, to get it back to you. And one thing that's nice is that they're professionally into imaging, and that's their gig, and that's what they do. So anyway, once again, a lot about color profiles today. I hope this is useful. If you still have questions or anything, feel free to email me or leave comments. You can send me @replies on Twitter. And again, if you like what you see, please consider leaving a comment in the iTunes store there, so we can hopefully in the future do more with this podcast. So anyway, once again, this has been The Art of Photography, and thank you for watching.